Stage two more guests. One, maybe you know him. When you are from the region here, you know Gerhardt. He was for many, many years a radio editor with WDR, Europe's biggest public broadcaster. But he was also in Nigeria as a development expert for the German cooperation. So we know quite well both worlds. Thank you for being with us, Gerhardt. And on the other side, I have also a man from two very different areas in his socialization. He is from the US, Eric May, media consultant, living for 12 years now in Germany, as consultant for German media, but also working as a documentary filmer, and lecturer at the University of Freiburg. The topic to discuss is the diversity of journalism versus international standards of journalism. So tell me, do you think that the global networks like CNN, Al Jazeera and others, maybe also in print, which are available all over the world, setting the standards of what we, in our perception, think is good journalism, is this really what the world needs, or is this killing also diversity in journalism, in storytelling, reporting all over the world?
Well, first of all, I think...
Big question, I know. So that's why
you are here. Okay. I think professional standards are important. And certainly the big broadcasters, whether they're in the States or Western Europe, they know how to reach audiences. And they have developed methods and techniques that are very effective in reaching audiences and building audience share. So these things I don't think can be ignored. But it is always a mistake, I think, to use a colonial approach and to go to some place that is not your own and say, just do it my way, and everything will be perfect. In my experience, that never works.
Okay. Kurt, do you agree on that?
You mentioned two words, very important words, standard and diversity. If the question is whether we become more similar to one another with regard to standards, stand quality, that's a good thing. If the same would happen for diversity, it would be a very bad thing, and we must resist that. Unifying developments have the tendency of flattening differences. We have the same thing in Europe. The different culture of the countries of the European Union can only survive if we resist that tendency. The same holds true, of course, for the international stage. But I don't see that. If I don't know all the world, but if I look and listen around the world from one country to another, I can only go, even if I only go from Germany to France, to England, there are lots of differences, big diversity.
You're teaching storytelling, so would you say there are quite different concepts here and there, and in the US, for instance, and also maybe in other parts of the world?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, because some things about storytelling are rather, let's say, archetypical, beginning, middle, and end, character, conflict, resolution, and that works almost in every culture I've ever worked in. That idea is in that culture. But obviously, stories have to be about people's own context, people's own experiences, otherwise it's simply not relevant.
Mm-hmm. Is there a potential clash between diversity and setting standards? I mean, you said, okay, there's a difference. Diversity, creativity, yes. But international standards in terms of journalists are the same for everybody. Isn't this clashing somehow?
No, it isn't. But I must pick up the word storytelling. The main thing about journalism is, if I'm a journalist, I come to you, you're my listener, and I say, I'm going to tell you something. I saw a great thing this morning. I heard something spectacular, fascinating, and I want to tell you about it. That's journalism. I want to tell you a story. And we have been too far estranged from this core activity of journalism. Storytelling is one thing German journalists don't do anymore. Whether they are incapable of doing it or somebody's telling them not to do it, I don't know. But it's bad.
But it's not only about standards, it's maybe also about style. It's about selection of topics. When you look at I used to work as a trainer, and I think that many journalists, also in Africa, for instance, or in Asia, as a reference, they take Al Jazeera, they take CNN, they take BBC and others. So they are looking to a model that they try to apply, and everybody tells them, this is how you have to do. This is good stuff. So, how to sort that out?
Well, if I could make a remark, Kurt. Well, remember the context of the BBC. and how it evolved in British society, or the ARD, which was a product of the post-war period in Germany, or CBS News, where I worked, which was a commercial venture springing out of the radio business in the States, is completely different from Teleradio Moldova, for example, or any country in Africa, many countries where television was used simply as a method of state control and to destroy people. That was the method in the Soviet system. That was where it came from.
Yeah.
So every institution has to respond and work within its own heritage and within its own context. But as Kurt pointed out, these certain standards about storytelling, about people-driven stories that prove relevance to the audience, are very useful.
But isn't there a pressure on journalists to stick with some role models and style that that is presented to them as something that is working globally? So that means uniformizing, looking for audience, etc., etc.
People who do that are not imaginative enough. They are not imaginative enough. But what is true is, let us enjoy the richness of world cultures. Telling stories, informing people is part of culture. So let us be diverse. Let us cultivate this diversity. All the rest makes the world poorer. And I want to live in a rich world.
If I could add to what Kurt said, everywhere I've gone, and I've worked in more than 35 countries now, everywhere I've gone, people have been hungry for methods. They've been hungry for technique. How do I tell a story? What is a strong character? How do I structure a story that an audience will stay with? What is the relationship of the first element to the last element, etc.? They all want that. How they express those ideas must be within their own cultural context.
And as far as possible, I would like to leave it to the people themselves to develop these capabilities and these facilities. I am very reticent when it comes to telling other people how they should write a newspaper, how they should run a radio program. Come on. No. They have their own brains and traditions and so on. Let them develop it, and the people who are their listeners or readers will tell them whether they like it or not.
That's the main point, the link to the listeners. Thank you very much. Strong final words from Kurt Gerhardt.